Hello there, my name is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as Ledev, and I am here to talk about some cards from Theros Beyond Death. As we all know, in paper, this set actually is going to be coming out next week, but it's actually coming out this week on Arena. I actually, thanks to Wizards of the Coast, I was able to have an opportunity to participate in the early access stream upcoming this Wednesday. So I'll be able to try out some of the new cards in the new set, try out some janky brews. If you want to check out the shenanigans, I'll leave a link to my Twitch channel out in the captions below. If you want to just jump in, maybe see if a brew can work or not, or even send me a link of a brew on my Twitter account, that would be lovely. Nevertheless, what I decided to come here for, though, I always like to do this as a tradition before I start the new set, and that is to talk about cards that you want to keep an eye out on. Now, I'm not going to necessarily say that these are going to be competitive cards, or these are going to be like day one cards, per se, but I do want to think these are cards that do have at least a chance to do some impact on the meta, or at least, at the very least, they're at least going to be fun cards to brew around, or at least have some fun doing some shenanigans with. Nevertheless, what I do is I try to restrict it to 2 cards from each color, even though it's been kind of tricky since green in this set had got a lot of good cards. I mean, a buttload, so restricting it to 2 is going to be tricky on that department. But I was able to do it successfully with the other colors and artifacts and such. Actually, with the artifacts, there's just really one artifact to keep an eye on in the upcoming meta. Nevertheless, though, let's actually get started in white. And the one card I did want to start out with that I think many people kind of knew it was going to be good, but I think it's a lot more effective than people take at first glance. Eidolon of Obstruction. 1 and a white for a 2/1 first strike enchantment creature spirit, and lower the abilities of planeswalkers your opponents control, costs 1 more to activate. Now, let's just get the obvious note out of the way. Yes, this is going to help us against a lot of turn free to, even to some instances, thanks to Gilded Goose, a lot of turn 2 planeswalker shenanigans. If you can play this on turn 2, if your opponent's playing a turn free Teferi, they're going to be feeling really awkward that the Teferi is going to be sticking to its specific loyalty and they can't bounce this because they will not have the mana up. That's going to be very awkward, and I do feel like this is going to be a very meta-dependent card, because if it turns out we are still playing a lot of the free cost walkers, then I can see this card seeing play. But if it turns out that the meta decides to move away from that, especially since the more broken ones have been rotated out of the meta, Oko and all that, I could see this just more sticking into the sideboards. But I do think one important note of this card that I think many people had kind of missed initially because they were like, oh, tax for planeswalkers, awesome, is the factor of 2 notes. 1, this is a 2/1 with first strike for 2 mana. That is actually really good stats for 2 mana. Like, a 2/1 first strike is actually pretty decent in this meta. Yeah, it doesn't block like the mid-range to late-game creatures, but anybody that's pretty much playing early-game creature shenanigans, like mono-red aggro and all that stuff, the factor is that this first strike helps trade against I always get the name wrong. It's pretty much the 1-cost knight that has first strike as well. I always get brain fart on it that makes the equipment cost 3 or less. The fact that this card equally trades into it if you need to is actually really, really nice to help against annoying red aggro shenanigans. As well, the fact that this is an enchantment creature should also not be underestimated, because I do think Constellation could be a very competitive mechanic in this upcoming meta. And the fact that this is one of the many good ones is actually really nice. Also, it's a spirit, so in Modern, if you're doing spirit shenanigans, this, at the very least, if you're playing Banned Spirits, probably will at least go on your sideboard, especially since, well, I guess technically now due to the bannings, you don't have to worry about Oko, but you still have to worry about your Teferis, and do people still play Liliana of the Veil in that meta? I wonder. Anyway, I don't really play much Modern, so I can't say. Nevertheless, though, I do think Eidolon Obstruction is a lot better 2-drop, and one theme that I think it's going to be kind of noticed throughout my talking of this video. One thing I've been noticing with this set, there's been a lot of what I like to call main boardable side tech cards. And what I mean by that is, technically speaking, is that there's not really a bad excuse of putting this card in your main board, because, at the very least, it's a 2-mana 2/1 with first strike, that's also an enchantment creature that can trigger off synergies with like Constellation, or maybe you have like a benefit with enchantments, devotion, etc., etc. But also, it just has the side tech versatility of, oh, it's going to be a little bit of a silver bullet if you're going against someone that plays early game Planeswalkers. So, or at least it's going to be very taxing to them. You're definitely going to notice that when I talk about other cards in this video, but keep in mind that's a theme that's kind of in the back of the head. Now, the other one I would feel remiss not to talk about since we're on that same note. Yes, Heliod Suncrown is going to be a very good card, especially it's going to be the good payoff card that life game matter decks need. But the one card that I think many people are kind of snickering at that they really shouldn't, Heliod's Intervention. It's white and the white, instant, choose one, destroy Et's target artifacts and or enchantments, or a target player gains Et's life. Now, I'll first mention the cute Pioneer combo you can do with this. The cute Pioneer combo is there's a card that came from Magic Oranges called Tainted Remedy, which is whenever your opponent gains life, they lose that much life. So, essentially what happens is, what you can do is, as long as you have Et's equals 10 and Tainted Remedy out, you can just deal 20 or more damage to your opponent thanks to Heliod's Intervention. And all you really have to do is just put 10 into it, or maybe not even have to do that, because if you're building a whole deck around the Tainted Remedy shenanigans, there are probably ways to get their life lower down, till a Heliod's Intervention for a decent Ets can actually help finish them off. But still, I think this card is better, because I think it is going to be a card that is actually going to be a pretty good main board or sideboard stay, at least in the standard meta coming up. And the main reason why I think of that is the factor is destroy Et's target artifact and or enchantments. As many people know, we are kind of in a meta where there's a lot of powerful enchantments and artifacts at the moment, Witch's Oven, Fires of Invention, etc., etc. And many people are probably going to make the argument, okay, yeah, those are popular decks, but this is a new meta coming up. We're probably going to have new deck archetypes and all that stuff, so how does this matter in that case if it's just going to target decks that we don't even know are going to be meta relevant? True, but I would also make the counter-argument for that one is there's a lot of cards upcoming in the set that could be meta-dependent cards that make Heliod's Intervention a lot more tempting. Case in point, there is a lot, and I mean a boatload lot, of enchantment creatures that are upcoming in the set. I mean, we just talked about one previously. There's also a lot of good ones in green, a lot of good ones in blue, black, etc., etc. And I feel like if enchantment creatures get very popular enough in the meta, I do think Heliod's Intervention could just be, in some circumstances, a instant speed one-boarded wrap to an extent, or can scale up to, like, for example, you could spend 4 mana to destroy their 2 most powerful enchantment creatures, or 3 mana to, when they cast their Fires of Invention, before they try to cast their first free spell, oh, I'm going to Heliod's Intervention, destroy that Fires of Invention, and I don't have to deal with it anymore. Bye-bye, see you later. So I do think this card actually is going to be one of the more prevalent standard cards. I do think the instant speed part of this card is very relevant. And in worst case scenarios, if you don't really need it for the tech, that gaining Et's life actually with how aggressive the meta can be at times is nothing to sneeze at. I feel like I said before of Eidolon Obstruction, the fact that its main board use is, oh hey, we're going to use this to destroy some problematic artifacts and enchantments that are within the local meta, to its sideboard use of, oh hey, if I go against the aggro or mono-red Cavalcade Burn deck, then this card is a really good silver bullet to them. So I think that is something to keep in mind with Heliod's Intervention. I think this card is a lot better than people take at first glance, but I think many people have realized, yeah, this is probably one of the better naturalized spells that we got for Commander / also Brawl, so keep that in mind. So those are the white cards I said to keep in mind, though I will say white did have a lot of decent cards to keep in mind, not some good kind of like board wipe shenanigans. I mean, a 4-mana board wipe, enough said on that. And also some aura matter synergies, but like I said, I'm shortening myself to 2, so we're going to now go to blue. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about one card that even many people have been talking about that's actually kind of going to be a decent card in the potential meta. Metamize Prophecies. 1 in the blue for a saga that has 4 steps. Scry 2. Step 2, choose a card name. Step 3, when you cast a spell with the chosen name for the first time this turn, draw 2 cards. Or step 4, look at the top card of each player's library. Now, I think this is a legit really good card. I do think this is one of those cards that if you're playing control, you might want to keep this card in mind. Mostly because this is, to some extent, as many people who already are praising this card pointing out, this is, to an extent, 2 mana scry 2, draw 2 cards, which is a 2 mana Glimmer of Genius. You don't get the energy from it, but still, this is kind of absurd. And also, the thing is, I do think all these steps are relevant. Scrying 2, really good. Scrying 2, being able to get a land you need, or maybe not, or a essential control card you need, very relevant. Sure, the step 2 is kind of the weakness of this card, because you are kind of telling your opponent, hey, this is the card I'm going to cast next turn as long as you don't hand-hate it out of my hand. Let's hope you don't hand-hate it out of my hand. But even if that's the case, you can still be a little cheeky with this card and choose a card name. Remember, you are scrying 2. So, one little strategy you can do with this card is do your scrying, make sure you keep a card second from the top if you can, choose the card name of the card you're going to be drawing on turn 3, since you scry 2, and then cast that spell, rather than keeping the card in hand that you're going to cast, and then someone can hand-hate it out, and you're like, oh. Now, this one also has the fault that if you go against a middle deck, you're in trouble, but like I said, there are ways to play around this card. You just really have to be observant of what deck you're going against and how you play with this card. But still, step 3, pretty much if you cast a spell with the chosen name, you draw 2 cards, which drawing 2 cards for 2 mana is pretty significant. And the last step that many people were just saying that's anticlimactic, but I do think is, for at least a control deck, very significant. Look at the top card of each player's library. Now, keep in mind, you look at the card, not your opponent. Your opponent doesn't know their top card, but you will know the top card, and you know your top card. And I do feel like this is a bit of hidden information that opponents kind of underestimate that can be really, really good in controlled deck designs. Like, if you know that your opponent's going to draw into gas, then you might not want to use that removal spell that you were going to use on their 2-drop or their 3-drop. You're probably going to use it on the inevitable 4-drop that they're going to release that's on the top of their library. Or maybe hold up counter magic, etc., etc. So I do think Metamized Prophecies, while a little underwhelming at first when you look at all the steps, I do think it is at least a really interesting card to consider for control decks. If there is one thing that's keeping it at bay, it's the fact that a lot of control decks like Simic Flash and all that stuff, they really not want to play this on turn 2 per se, because they want to hold up Quench and all that stuff. But if you're more like not a instant control deck, but more of a sorcery speed control deck, then I think Metamized Prophecies is something to be at least very considerate about, at the very least. Next up, another card to keep in mind for the blue players and all of us, and mostly I'm just talking about this one because I think it's, besides the alternate win condition one, kind of my favorite card from blue. Fritz the Sudden Storm. 5 mana for a 4/5 flash with flying. It's a legendary creature, elemental giant. Spells you cast with converted mana cost 5 or greater cost 1 less to cast, and they can't be countered. That is a really, really good ability for this card. I think there's many people that are going to sleep on this card because I think the first thing that people take at first glance, it's like, oh, this is going to be a perfect inclusion in Simic Flash because, oh, hey, Nissa is uncounterable, yay, all that stuff, and, oh, hey, I can maybe play like a really good board wipe that's costs high mana and all that stuff. Or maybe I could play a really good control kind of draw spell and such. But I do think this, the fact that, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's the 6 costs. That doesn't even work because that spell can already not be countered from Fritz the Sunstorm. I was thinking the Bolus spell, the one that amasses with how many cards you draw in hand. But there is a lot of high-impact spells and enchantments that were at a high cost that, thanks to the cost reduction of Fritz the Sunstorm, does have the chance to make them more standard viable. Plus, also, the one thing that I think many people have already realized, but for those who haven't yet, this is a giant. And many people have been trying to make giant Tribal Matter decks work. And the fact that this makes Sweep Away, which is the adventure portion of Railchrome Giant, uncounterable, as well as Realmcroak Giant himself, and making them both of the spells cost 1 less and uncounterable is legit absurd. Seriously, it seems like Fritz and Realmcroak Giant were made to be put into a deck together. It's just that, it's legitimately that absurd. Also, there's just maybe you could put this in a Thousand Year Storm deck, where now your Thousand Year Storm costs one less, and then now you have an uncounterable, so the opponent can't counter it, so you can storm off next turn. It's just, there's a lot of silly shenanigans you can do with this card, both kind of like in Standard as well as in like Commander and Brawl, so I like this card a lot. I am definitely going to try to make a Bant or maybe even like a 4-colored Giant deck, just because I think this card is just a legitimately good piece for that deck. Plus, the factor that it has Flash, so you can cast it at the end of your opponent's turn, is really, really nifty. Especially if you can use it as a chump blocker and just make sure that the Giant survives. So, legit, really cool card from the set. I really, really want to get a foil of this. Now we got done with blue, let's actually go to black. And black, also along with green, is getting a lot of good cards. Like getting stuff like Agonize for Remorse, Eat to Extinction. I mean, for Pete's sakes, we're getting... Oh, how would I phrase this without being too giddy? We're getting Gary back. Gary is coming back. Or where did they put Gary in this spoiler? It's around here somewhere. Ah, there we go. Gary is back, which is awesome. But let's actually talk about cards that I think you want to keep an eye on. Yes, Gary is one you do want to keep an eye on, but let's consider that a no-brainer honorary mention. Cards I think you want to keep your eye out on. One that I will say that many competitive players have already pointed this out, but I do think it is one to keep an eye on. Hateful Eidolon. 1 black for a 1/2 enchantment creature, Spirit, with lifelink, and whenever an enchanted creature dies, draw a card for each aura you controlled that was attached to it. This card is really, really good 1-drop. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this is kind of a card that helps negate against one con about auras in general, is that if you try to buff up your creatures and it dies to a removal spell, then you kind of 2 to free 1 for yourself. But the fact that a Hateful Eidolon can be on the battlefield, and whenever one of your creatures with an aura on it dies, then you will draw as many cards with how many auras are attached to it, this makes a really good 1-drop insurance policy for you going into an aura-based strategy. Not only that, but we also have a lot of control-based auras in the meta. We have stuff like Deadweight, we're going to have Maya's Grass coming in the meta. We even have stuff like Pacifism and stuff like that can actually help with Hateful Eidolon, because then, let's say, for example, you cast a Deadweight on a creature, kill it. Since you still control that aura, you're going to do a card draw out of what mostly is killing an opponent's creature, which is legit absurd. And the factor is, this triggers on multiple instances of this, so if you have multiple Hateful Eidolons out and do that, you will draw multiple cards. It's just, this card is really absurd in the right decks. Like, if an Orzhov Aura control deck can exist, they are going to rely on this card a lot. Like, it's going to be an auto 4-clued in the deck. No sweat about that. But yeah. The other black card, I would say, that is one to keep an eye out on, though I think many people have already kind of realized it's good, but let's just say this is the honorary. If you just got into Magic recently, let me give you a quick lesson about powerful cards. World Strider, 2 and a black for a free 2 horror. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 white creature token, sacrificing that a creature, scry 1. Now, for those who don't know, this has been in a while, even though you have seen kind of like aristocratic decks with all the Witch's Oven shenanigans and Priest of Forgotten Gods. You ever notice that majority of those sacrifice outlets have conditions, like you have to tap the Priest of Forgotten Gods down and sacrifice 2 other creatures? Or, hey, with the Witch's Oven, you have to tap the Witch's Oven down and stuff like that? Well, this, my Magic the Gathering players, is a sack outlet that doesn't require any condition other than having a creature to sacrifice to it. It's an unconditional sack outlet. And in Magic, the times that we have unconditional sack outlets are the times where aristocratic decks become really, really good. I can't underestimate this. The fact that we have this as an unconditional sack outlet is significant, because let's say the opponent tries to remove it and you still have a board state you don't mind sacking. You just sack, sack, sack. Get your sack triggers, get your death triggers like with Mayhem Devil or like the Cruel Celebrant and such, and just go to town. Not to mention we have other cards that benefit when they get death, like for example, one that didn't got the list, but many people are like, yeah, it's going to see competitive play, is Nightmare Shepherd. I mean, the factor is when the creature dies because you sat to the Will Strider, you're still going to get a 1/1 copy, which, by the way, if you're in an aristocrat-based strategy deck design, you can just sack down and get additional points of ping damage. It's just legit absurd. Yeah, Wall Strider is kind of the no-brainer. This is going to be a card that, if Aristocrats is still a competitive deck, it's going to see play day one. No sweat about it. Like, you're going to see this card a lot. Now, going to Red. Red also has a lot of good cards as well, but if I had to restrict them to two, I think the two good red cards that people are underestimating, Perforos's Intervention. I think many people are down on this card because of the sorcery speed aspect of it, which, by the way, Teferi negates that. But even then, I still think this is a really, really good card. Mostly because I think this is a card that elemental decks really, really will enjoy putting in their deck as a 2 or 3 of. Because the factor is it creates a red elemental creature, which that's the one part that many people are like, I would rather do the burn spell, which, yes, the burn spell portion is the better part of the spell. But the elemental creature, with how many elemental-based triggers that we have in the meta, such as stuff like Risen Reef, or even like stuff like Trailblazer, or even Omnath himself, I do think you should not underestimate the aspect of Perforos's Intervention creating this elemental creature, which, by the way, if you're playing any like ramp deck or elemental matter ramp deck, Perforos's Intervention can make a really, really big elemental creature that could swing in for potentially game. I think there's going to be a lot of games in the upcoming meta where people are going to win just because Perforos's Intervention was able to make like a 15-1 elemental swing in for the final points of damage. Bada bing, bada boom. So yeah, don't underestimate that. But yes, I would be not remiss to mention the most popular aspect of this card, and it's the second choice, which is it deals twice X damage to target creature or planeswalker. So, in other words, pretty much all you have to do is put like 2, maybe even in some instances put 1 mana into this, and it kills a majority of free cost planeswalkers if they go negative. And then if you decide just to put 3 and 4, it pretty much kills a majority of the popular planeswalkers in the current meta. With the exception of Kiara, which then, by the way, all you have to do is just make sure X is 4 or 5. So, yeah, I think this is going to kill a lot of planeswalkers in this meta if this sees popular play. As well as just it being useful as a burn spell to destroy really problematic creatures, also can't be underestimated as well. Also, keep in mind, in Mono Red with Torben, this can make it where you can just pretty much read that says deal twice X plus 2 to target thing that you find problematic and such. Oh, and by the way, the elemental creature would deal 2 additional damage, which who knows, that could matter or not. So, Perforos's Intervention, a way better intervention than I think people are giving it credit for. I do think this will see a lot of play in Mono Red and also elemental-based deck strategies, and any ramp decks is probably going to play this as a victory condition. Also, the other card that I think many people have been realizing, but I had to admit, many people were like, on it, but then I kind of came around, and many people have been coming around to it. Anat's Hardened in the Forge. I almost kind of thought that this was, with the exception of maybe the green one, was the worst demigod of the demigod cycle, but I do think this is like the second best now, the more I think on it. Like, it was one of those I kind of came to the revelation over the weekend on it. But Anat's Hardened in the Forge, 1 red for a star-free demigod, and it has its powers equal to your devotion to red, so it's going to be a 2-free or 3-free, etc., etc., etc. But whenever himself, Anats, or another non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 red satire creature token with this creature can't be blocked, and the creature has power 4 or greater. Create 2 of those tokens instead. Yeah, this card is actually really good in multiple decks. So let's get through some of them. 1. In, like, pretty much Cavalcade Red or any red aggro deck, this is absurd, because the fact that this triggers on itself and be able to create those 1/1 tokens, which, by the way, triggers Cavalcade, is legit silly. As well, it's just the fact that this is a threat that it's annoying when it's alive and it's annoying when it's dead, because the 1/1, like I said before, will trigger Cavalcade, but also itself, if you don't answer this, it can get big pretty quick. I mean, like with Torben, this could be attacking for, if let's say if Anats was the only thing on the battlefield, and then you play Torben, which is free red, then you're essentially, let's do the math here. So 2 plus 3, that's 5 devotion, which in the additional 2 dates to Torben's effect, so it's going to attack as a 7 free. That is pretty absurd when you think about it. I mean, that is probably the most silliest thing about this card. And the mention is, no matter when you have creatures out on the battlefield, this is an insurance policy for your creatures. So if you get inevitably board wipe, which a lot of board wipes are in this meta, with the exception of the Massacre Girl board wipe, you're going to have a bunch of 1/1s, which those 1/1s, as we said before, triggers Cavalcade. That's just legitimately absurd. Another thing that I think people are not realizing this card that's actually decent in, it's actually decent in Aristocrats. Because the factor is since we have the factor that Woestrider is now a card, which is an unconditional sack outlet, the factor that Anats can make our cards have additional value by having the token which we can sack for extra, that is legit absurd. Because let's say, for example, we have the kitty combo out, we have the Witch's Oven, we have the cat, then let's say we have a Cruel Celebrant out, and then now we have this on turn 3. All you really have to do is have a Woestrider on turn 4, or even not have a Woestrider on turn 4. Like, you can just have the kitty combo, sacrifice a cat, get an extra token, which then will get you the food, which then you will sacrifice just to get the cat back to do the temporary drain effect. But then you get the other 1/1 token, which then later, once you play a Woestrider or something, you can just sack that unconditionally, get additional points of drain with Cruel Celebrant. Not to mention, this is also a decent synergy with Teysa Karlov, because with Teysa Karlov, those 1/1 tokens will now have Lifelink and Vigilance. I mean, it's just... this card is a lot more absurd and more versatile. Like, I've seen many people who've been pointing this card out being really good. It's like, oh, this is going to be a perfect stay in Cavalcade and Calamity. And while I do not deny that whatsoever, I do think that also in Aristocrat decks, this is going to be surprisingly really good. So yeah, if you see this play in Aristocrats, don't be too surprised. Because those 1/1 tokens are really good sack outlets when you think about it. Yeah. Red does have some pretty cool cards. But now that we're going to go from red, we're going to go from red to green. And restricting to 2 green cards that are good, or at least cards to keep an eye on, is hard. Because green has just got a buttload of good cards. Like, I'm not going to go on my rant like I did on my stream about Nitzbloom Ancient, but pretty much put it in a nutshell, the fact that we have a lot of activated abilities and Fires of Invention in the meta makes this card, I think, going to be very absurd. So, yeah, I'm not going to go into that rant again. Cards that I do say that you want to keep your eye out, though, if I'm being honest, one that many people are down on, but I do think it's a lot more better than people take it granted, Wolf Willowhaven. 1 in a green for an enchantment or enchant land. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its control adds an additional green. And then you can sacrifice it for 5 mana to create a 2/2 green wolf creature token that you can only activate during your turn, which, okay. Now, I think this card is really good because with a majority of these type of effects, we have never really got an effect like this that can, for the most part, add 2 mana. A majority of the enchantment aura effects that we have like this are like free mana, even in some instances more high cost if it taps for more mana. I think the highest has been free. Maybe there's been a 4/1 in the past, but I think it's mostly free as a high cost. We never really see a 2-cost like ramps or like this in a while. And I think this is going to cause a lot of more good tempo plays and good just ramp than people take for granted. Yes, we do live in the days with Nissa, who shakes the world and all that stuff, and Nissa does this effect twice better, plus you get a powerful Planeswalker. Yeah, I get that. But the factor that you can play this on turn 3 and then still have 2 mana open to, like, cast a bear or cast, like, another enchantment aura to enchant one of your forests so you can ramp for more mana next turn, I think that is significant. Plus, it's also an aura, so if you're playing, like, any green devotion-based matter deck designs, that's something to keep in mind. And even then, when late in the game, once ramp doesn't matter, you can just still use this and just get a 2/2 that could be used as a chump blocker for your opponent, or just maybe used to get the final 2 points of damage in. I do think this card is a lot better than people are taking at first glance. It's just hard because there's been so many good green cards that I think this one's being overlooked, but don't sleep on this card. This card is actually a lot more versatile and a lot more better in ramp decks, even with Nissa in the meta, than people take at first glance. And then the other card that I would say in green to keep your eye out on, complete honesty, this one's a hard one, but I think the one that you need to keep an eye out on is the Saga, the first Iron Games. 2 and a green for a rare Saga. Create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Step 2, put free +1/+1 counters on target creature control. Step 3, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw 2 cards. And then the last step, create a gold token. Now, this card for me screams, oh my, this is a really good card in mono green decks. And here's the main reason. This card is surprisingly synergistic with the more popular green cards that are played in the meta. Like, for example, Lovestruck Beast. Let's say you get your free drop out, they destroy the 1-drop so you don't attack with it. You can just next turn play the first Iron Games, which, by the way, is still going to give you the 1/1 white human soldier creature token, since it only matters that it's a 1/1, so you get a 1/1, which then synergizes with Questing Beast, so you can attack it still in with the Questing Beast. As well as putting free +1/+1 counters on the next step, we have a lot of really good big creatures in green. That getting those additional counters on them is nice. Like, imagine putting those free +1/+1 counters on, like, a Questing Beast or something like that. That's absurd. Or, I mean, even for a safe insurance policy, maybe you could put it on, like, a Gilded Goose. Maybe you can put it on Lovestruck Beast as well. And step 3, in the current meta, is just way too easy. I think many people are like, I love the flavor, how it's technically the flavor of the card is supposed to be, oh, this human is training up for the games, and then he's going to get rewarded for training and such. But let's be frank, that step 3 is pretty much, you have not got Born White, you're going to draw 2 cards. That's pretty much what that should say, because a majority of green decks currently in the meta play cards that do have power 4 or greater. We're talking Lovestruck Beast, we're talking Questing Beast. I mean, heck, even if we go into Gagari, there's stuff like Rotting Regisaur that pretty much says, hey, I'm going to draw those 2 cards, which I will probably not mind since they are probably need to be used as discard fodder if I don't want to discard something from my hand. And yeah, I guess the less exciting thing about this is the create a gold token, but to be frank, a majority of green decks, as well as any decks that splash kind of like another color, do have powerful edge spells within their deck design, and more are coming in the meta with stuff with the Intervention cycle and the Finale cycle. You got to keep that in mind. That I think having an additional mana thanks to the gold token is nothing to sneeze at. Plus, I'm going to bet you that one of the games is going to be literally somebody using a gold token and a creature they have on the battlefield to get out an earlier, like, Great Hinge or some shtick like that. So, first Orion Games, I think it's going to be a mainstay in a majority of green decks. It's just really good with what their overall game design plan is and with creatures that are already popular within their deck design. So, keep an eye. Plus, also the flavor is a flavor win, so. Oh yeah, and honorary mention / I think it's broken. It's Bloom Ancient. Just go to my Twitch review and just go to the green section, and long story short, Fires of Vengeance breaks this card. Okay, next up, we're actually going to go to the gold cards, and this one is pretty easy for me because I think one card I'm going to talk about that people are kind of not really that excited about, but I think it's actually a lot more better standard card than people take for granted. Kaelit's the Destiny Hand. 2 green and a white for Loyalty Planeswalker. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an enchantment card from among them and put that card into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. -3, exile target creature or enchantment you don't control until target enchantment you control leaves the battlefield. Or return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, I think this card is a lot better. Now, originally, I think many people, when they were kind of not that optimistic on the card for standard, it's because they figured it doesn't protect itself very well. And yeah, it kind of doesn't. Like, the -3, you're going to have an enchantment or a creature, or no, you have to have an enchantment on the battlefield to be able to get the Oblivion Ring-like effect for -3. But I do think that's going to be a lot more easier, and that is because the +1. Because the +1, yes, the fact that it says it has to be an enchantment that you fetch from the top 4 is tricky. However, one thing you got to keep in mind, and as I've been showing, that's why I kind of wanted to go through Scryfall, which, by the way, great site, to show off the set, and if you were browsing while I was browsing through the collection, you may have noticed that there's been a lot of enchantment creatures in the set. And I think a lot of those enchantment creatures are going to see standard play one way or another. So the fact that a majority of the deck can run enchantments as well as enchantment creatures, this +1 should pretty much read, look at the top 4 cards of your library, you may reveal an enchantment card or enchantment creature from among them and put that card into your hand. And when you read it like that, then the card legitimately gets a lot better. Plus, the factor is the -3 is just really good. I don't really think this is a card you have to rely on the ultimate, but the ultimate does have some nice synergies, especially if you have some like Wumble combo that you can do with the -7. And the fact that this just only requires free activations, the +1 to do that is pretty nice. I think the -7, though, is going to be more relevant in Commander than it is going to be in Standard, because there's just some ridiculously silly shenanigans you can do in enchantments decks in like Eternal formats, but I think in Standard, that +1 and -3 is going to be a lot more relevant. Now, I'm not going to say that you should like run like a playset of this in your like deck if you were running a lot of enchantments or enchantment creatures, but I think running a 1 or 2 of can actually be very nice with your overall deck design if you see you're going more into the enchantment/enchantment creature route. And with that, I think this card is actually going to at least see some standard play, especially if we have like an enchantments matter type deck within the meta. Especially since we're seeing a lot of control wars, payoffs, and all that stuff. So keep Khalet's eye on Khalet's. I always get the pronunciation of that wrong. Keep an eye on it. I do think it's one of the better planeswalkers of the set, and that's even talking about Ashiok. Yes, Ashiok is good, but I do think Questing Beast is going to keep it in check, as well as Kalis, in my opinion. So, another card that I would say to keep an eye out on, and let's see, where is it? I think one that many people are not sleeping on per se, but I think many people had forgot about it. Staggering Insight. Staggering Insight, white and a blue for an enchantment aura. Enchantment creature. Enchantment creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This card kind of scares me a little bit, mostly because this reminds me of Curious Obsession, which Curious Obsession was a really good card for Mono Blue Tempo. And I think Staggering Insight, while I'm not saying it's going to be good for a Mono Blue Tempo deck, because, well, it's blue-white, I do think a Boggles deck is there in the making with this card, as well as other really good auras that we got from the set. Plus, we have the Hexproof Creature of Paradise Druid, so I do feel like this card will see at least a little bit of play in those deck designs, because if you can deal combat damage and draw a card, it's nice. Plus, also secretly, I think this is one of the better cards to put in Flyers. And I can't believe I'm even saying that. But yeah, I do think this is a decent card in Flyers, because, yeah, you are able to at least get the card draw pretty decently, since you're going to have flying creatures. They are going to swing over. Plus, the lifelink is actually good tempo, especially if you're going against like a burn matchup and such. So put it on one of your bigger flying creatures, get that little bit of life point damage, and then just draw some cards, which, yeah, the draw deck wants to draw cards to help draw into their payoffs. Like their big, like, the one War the Spark free cost sorcery spell that makes their, or no, not sorcery, instant, that makes their flying creatures a lot more bigger and untapped, and, you know, stuff like that. In other words, any, like, overrun type spells and such. So, I think you'll see a play in the Flyers deck, but I also think that if a Bant, specifically, if a Bant Boggles deck can exist in Standard, I think this is going to be like a 3 or 4 within the deck. Because the fact that this can just buff your creature, your Boggle up, and as well give you card draw is pretty significant. And also making it a lifelink against like aggressive metas is nothing to sneeze at either. Now, next up, we're going to go to the artifacts. Actually, one thing I will talk about, yes, Uro, Titan's Nature's Laugh. It's good, but I'll go into detail maybe later and such, maybe even on stream this upcoming Wednesday. It's not an no-go. It's a good card, but it's not no-go, okay? It's good within the deck designs it's going to be in, but it's not an Oko broken card. Okay, we're good? We're good. Now, one card that I do think is almost kind of broken, or very, very powerful that's within artifacts, and I kind of was waiting to talk about this card. Shadowspear. A 1-mana legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and lifelink. Activated ability of 1. Note, you don't have to have a creature equipped on it to have the activated ability. The artifact itself has this ability. But 1 mana. Permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Equip 2. I think this card is legitimately a really absurd standard card. Originally, I think I gave it 4 stars during my review, but I'm starting to realize I should probably give this a 5-star rating, because I do think it has the potential to be busted. The keyword is potential. Mostly the main reason why is because I'm starting to come to a realization, and I kind of jokingly said this on Twitter, but I kind of don't jokingly saying this. This is kind of the Soul Ring of Standard, at the very least. And what I mean by that, yes, Soul Ring is a really different card, don't get me wrong, that's a mana rock. But what I mean by that is like how pretty much in Commander, where pretty much everybody says the main rule in Commander is you always have to have a Soul Ring, and now you have to always have an Arcane Signet thanks to the Brawl decks. I think in Standard, at the very least, I think this is going to be the card that's just your obligatory 1 mana artifact that you just are going to put in a majority of deck designs, especially if they're creature-oriented deck designs. Because yet again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, there's a lot of cards in the set that have the versatility of just having a primary use, but then have kind of like a sideboard tech use as well. And this is a perfect example of that card. It's the epiphany of this type of card design. The factor is that you get a really good sideboard effect that you would keep in your sideboard for the majority of the time, aka permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Yes, a majority of people are pointing out the flavor wind that this kills God, and oh hey, it kills Hylian, haha, flavor wind of the day, yes. But I do think a lot of people don't realize that this is going to actually be a lot more effective against more earlier hexproof creatures than you take at first glance. AKA, you can play this on turn 1 in like a, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but you can play this in mono red. Because the way you're playing this is you can play this on turn 1, and then if your opponent's playing green and they play their obligatory, let's say, Paradise Druid, because they're wanting to ramp to turn 4 or turn 5 mana in early turns, you can just simply say, activate this card, which doesn't have to be equipped by a creature, mind you, make the Paradise Druid lose its hexproof, shock it. So you can actually bolt one of the more harder to bolt birds in this meta thanks to Shadow Spear. That is going to be pretty significant early game tempo play than people take at first glance. Also, the factor is, this is just a card that's good in creature-oriented deck designs because the factor that once you equip it to something, giving that creature +1/+1 and trample and lifelink, it's just absurd for how low this cost is. Because there's a lot of very powerful creatures within the meta that giving it trample and lifelink, it's just nuts. Like, let's think about this for a minute. Let's think about stuff like, I don't know, Questing Beast. Imagine equipping a Shadow Spear to a Questing Beast, and your opponent has a Planeswalker on there. Not only are you going to get the trample damage through, but also since it's going to deal damage to the opponent's Planeswalker, you're going to gain double life to its current power, which if it's 4/4 still, presuming it didn't got buffed by anything, it's then going to get the +1/+1 buff from Shadow Spear, which then makes it a 5/5, so that's a 10-point life swing while also destroying a problematic Planeswalker. No, even a 15-point life swing, because you're doing 5 damage to the opponent. It's just, that's absurd. That is ridiculously really absurd for a 1-mana card. I think that's the thing that people need to realize, how absurd this card is. The fact that it's 1 mana. This is the... I know many people are like saying, oh, but is this just better than Embercleave? Maybe not. Like, they both have their versatile uses. Embercleave is more combat trick-oriented, while Shadow Spear is more like just a good way to make mid-range decks more viable. But I don't see a world... I don't see a world where a deck where it can both have Embercleave as well as Shadow Spirit. I think that's going to be deck design in general. I think there's going to be some decks that literally are going to have 2 Shadow Spears and then 2 Embercleaves within their deck design. I mean, this is like almost an auto-include in Mardu Knights without a sweat. Because they have like that knight that makes it where the equipment cost is 0 for that individual card. It's a 1-drop. Hey, turn 2, you play that 1-drop, you play Shadow Spear. Oh, hey, you got a 2/2 with First Strike, Trample, and Lifelink. Do I have to say anything more by that? But also, I just think in any creature-oriented deck design, like, I can keep going. Like, let's imagine in Jun Sack, you attach this to, say, like a Mayhem Devil. And then anytime you peen thanks to your sap triggers, because you're doing the cat dance with the Cauldron Oven familiar, you're going to get little points of life, not to mention the Mayhem Devil being a 4/4 with Trample and Lifelink. Even in Lifelink deck synergy decks, like the fact that you can attach this to a Giant's Primate is just... Plus, also, like in Giants, the fact that you can attach this to like a Realm Cloak Giant or Frats or just any... Like even a Bone Crusher Giant, making it into a 5/4 with Lifelink and Trample. I mean, I know a lot of people have been joking how this set is going to be the set that's going to give us a lot more people mainboarding enchantment removal. I think many people are just thinking of like, oh, the gods are going to do that, or oh, anything that's going to fuel Fires of Invention, the kitty deck is going to do that. No. Yes, that's going to happen. But I think if there's the one card that's going to fuel enchantment removal being a top priority in main boardable deck, it's Shadowspear. Shadowspear is just that legit absurd of a card, and I think it's going to be a mainstay in a majority of standard deck designs. With the exception of maybe like more spell-centric decks, but even then, those decks usually sometimes will run like a Crackling Drake or run like a token generator, which then attaching a Shadowspear to that. It's just so freaking absurd. Like, the more I think about it, and the more how I can think about it, you can just blast this as a 2-of in any deck. I think this card is legitimately a mythic power level card that for some reason they decided to make a rare in this set. And I can't believe it. Like, the more I think about it, I can't actually legit believe that. Yes, it's a legendary artifact, so you don't want to go full playset on this, obviously. But I do think the power, and the potential power you get from this card, as both for its side tech versatility, as well as mainboard power level, is something to not underestimate. Shadowspear, I think it's a card that's going to be very, like, if you want me to tell you what's a safe day one craft, I'm not going to recommend day one crafting anything. I'd still say wait a few weeks till the meta solves. But I would not be dumbfounded if any like top tier meta deck is not running Shadowspear, because this card is just that good. It's really, really absurd. It's probably one of the more powerful rares in the set. And we're talking about a card we're talking about some really, really powerful rares in this set. So keep that in mind. And nevertheless, that is all the cards that I wanted to tell you to keep an eye on for Theros Beyond Death. For those who don't know, this upcoming Wednesday, I'm going to participate in their early access stream. I'm going to have the schedule of my Twitch schedule of streaming it down below in the caption, as well as comments. I hope you guys can enjoy the shenanigans there. If you want me to try out any silly decks, just post it either within my Twitter feed that I will post on the link below, or within the comments themselves if you want me to try out stuff. I can't wait to give it a shot, and I can't wait to try out some of these cards that even I say to keep an eye on. Nevertheless, I hope you all have a lovely day. This is LevDev, signing out. Bye.